Board, and I call this meeting to order. Welcome to all board members and advisors, staff, on-site visitors, online listeners, and Twitter followers. Remember to follow the North Carolina State Board of Education on Twitter at EDStateBoard_NC. I remind the audience and those listening that this body meets monthly with its official meeting scheduled for the first Thursday of the month. Discussion of agenda items were held yesterday prior to the official meeting day. And a reminder, on-site visitors and online listeners, that you can follow the meeting online and see our materials by going to SBE meetings at www.ncpublicschools.org. Board members are reminded it's our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts of interest as we handle the work of this board. Does any member of the board know of any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before us at this meeting? If so, please state them for the record, and if during the meeting you become aware of an actual or apparent conflict of interest, please bring the matter to the attention of the chair. It will then be your duty to abstain from participating in discussion on the matter and from voting on the matter. At this time, I call on Dr. Oxendine to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine.
You're welcome.
You bet. So as we mentioned yesterday, this is Read Across America Day, and we'd like to join that celebration, and I'll turn to Ms. Tanya Parrish with the Office of Early Learning to lead this celebration. Ms. Parrish.
So good morning, Chair Davis, Vice Chair Duncan, Superintendent Truitt, members of the board, colleagues, and stakeholders. Today is National Read Across America Day. It's a day to celebrate our favorite activity, reading. Yes! Reading inspires creativity, curiosity, and a passion for lifelong learning. Books challenge us, teach important lessons, enrich our understanding of different cultures, perspectives, and people. Today, we celebrate the joy of reading. We are thankful to the parents, caregivers, teachers, authors, and community members who invest in our children every day. Thank you. Recently, over 10,000 North Carolina students participated in Malcolm Mitchell's global virtual reading challenge called Read Bowl. North Carolina has been recognized as one of the top states participating in this year's Read Bowl. Go North Carolina. Malcolm Mitchell is a Super Bowl champion, author, and the founder and CEO of the Share the Magic Foundation. Of all of his accomplishments, Malcolm has stated learning to read being among the greatest. As a struggling reader himself, he now travels the globe to inspire and encourage students of all ages that everyone can read. It is very important for us to all join into this challenge to encourage our students to read. I hope that every single one of us today will take time to read a book. It is an honor to recognize an individual who inspires and promotes successful reading opportunities and outcomes for her students, and who has recently received a national award from the Share the Magic Foundation. Thanksgiving Elementary third grade teacher Nicole Humphrey has figured out the secret of how to capture her students' attention, and it is as easy as opening a book. Humphrey was named the Share the Magic Foundation Educator of the Year at the 2023 Magical Evening of Literacy Gala, which was just held this past weekend at the Fox Theater in Atlanta. Since 2007, Humphrey has been a teacher with Johnston County Public Schools, serving in various roles. This is her 5th year that she and her students have participated in Read Bowl. Literacy is important to Humphrey, not only for the students that already have a love of reading, but for the ones who aren't good readers yet. Her joy comes from being a part of their journey as readers and as students who begin to open their minds and learn to read. Through her participation in the Foundation's Read with Malcolm literacy programs, her students have increased their reading scores. Principal Chad Hewitt of Thanksgiving Elementary School stated that 95% of their kids met or exceeded growth. And overall, the third graders at Thanksgiving Elementary have shown tremendous growth in reading scores after participating in Read Bowl. So far this year, the Buffalo Bookworms third grade team, they have read over 798,438 minutes. And this past Super Bowl Sunday, Nicole leading the way, those Buffalo Bookworms were named the world champions of the 2023 Read Bowl. This is a national honor. Schools all across the country have participated in this. It has been shared with me by the foundation that North Carolina has been among their top readers. We have had several of our schools that have made it into the top 20 for this year, with Nicole and the Buffalo Bookworms team winning the world champion. Not only did those students win the world champion, but congratulations, Nicole, because you were named Educator of the Year for your third graders participating in this world champion, and for all you do every day of the year to inspire reading and to lead at your school. So at this time, I am very proud to introduce you to Nicole Humphrey.
Oh, that's going to be hard not to get emotional after that. Good morning. I'm so incredibly humbled and honored to have received this recognition and being given the opportunity to share my heart with you on National Read Across America Day. In education, teachers often refer to their why. What we mean by this is the reason why we do what we do. It is the motivation and the love behind our work every day. Oftentimes, this why is a student who we have encountered who symbolizes our desire and need to make a difference. When considering what words I could possibly say to capture even a fragment of my journey in education that led me to this point, I've decided to share with you my why. It was about 15 years ago. I was teaching 9th grade history at West Johnston High School, and I had a student in my class who had gotten to the point that he absolutely hated school and had given up on himself completely. His name was Tony. Tony was the kind of young man who was so very complicated. He wore the hardened mask of indifference and had the kind of behaviors that drove most people away. Tony was one of my favorite students that year. He never smiled, and it became my determination to change that. I often think about a quote by Russell Barkley, a clinical professor of psychiatry and author of numerous books about ADHD for parents. He says, "The children who need love the most will always ask for it in the most unloving ways." That is what Tony did every single day. It was exhausting trying to reach him, but something inside of me needed to. And so one day I went to the office and pulled out Tony's cumulative folder. I wasn't trying to analyze data or examine his test scores or even his past grades. I was there for one thing: the page that contained his yearly school pictures. You see, my one and only goal that day was to find out when Tony had stopped smiling. Kindergarten through 3rd grade, I saw a sweet little boy with a joyful face illuminated with the possibilities that lie ahead. But after that, his face became uncertain. His eyes lost their sparkle, and slowly he grew into the hardened, defeated young man I saw every day. I shared what I found with Tony himself, and I asked him to tell me his story. I actually asked him to write it. But you see, Tony couldn't do this. Because at the age of 15, Tony couldn't read. So instead, we wrote it together, with him dictating, me scribing his words. It was through this experience that Tony became my why. 6 years ago, I made the decision to transition from secondary education to elementary. I remember being asked my reason for this in my interview and sharing the story of my time with Tony. After doing so, I proclaimed what I stand for to this day with all of my heart. I want to do everything I can to teach children to believe in themselves and develop a lifelong love of learning so that there will never be a year that they stop smiling. There are so many factors that go into making this commitment, but one of the greatest is literacy. It is a researched fact that students who are not fluent readers by the time they complete the 3rd grade face a lifelong struggle in education. And so as a 3rd grade English language arts teacher, I have both the opportunity and the responsibility every single year to impact the trajectory of my students' academic futures, especially those who come to me as struggling readers. At 8 and 9 years old, children have already developed a sense of awareness of their strengths and difficulties, and knowledge of these difficulties has already begun to affect their self-esteem. To empower these young people to be vulnerable enough to step out of their comfort zones and open themselves up to the possibility of becoming fluent readers, it takes compassion, consistency, and a little bit of magic. I first encountered the Share the Magic Foundation 5 years ago. At the time, I was teaching 5th grade, and a mentor of mine had suggested that I find a reading competition as a next step in building my students' stamina with independent reading. The very first competition I found was Read Bowl. As I read about it, I was filled with excitement. Malcolm Mitchell's story immediately captured my heart as I was once again reminded of my Tony, my why. I knew that the young Tonys of my class would be able to see themselves in him and perhaps for the first time in their lives believe that if this awesome football player could put himself out there, work hard to improve his reading, and be successful, maybe, just maybe, they could too. I read on learning that not only was Read Bowl a national competition with incredible resources for teachers, it was actually 100% free for us to participate in. I was shocked, inspired, and I couldn't wait to start this exciting journey with my students. To say that Read Bowl impacted our lives that year is a massive understatement. It was truly transformative. You could literally see the sparkle in every single one of my students' eyes throughout what was likely the most important 4 weeks of their education thus far. It's been 5 years since that first Read Bowl experience, and my work as a member of the Share the Magic Foundation's Teacher Advisory Board has become an inextricable piece of my heart as an educator. It is so life-giving to be able to partner with a nonprofit organization whose sole mission is to inspire kids to read to a better future by empowering educators with free, engaging virtual reading challenges, inspiring students through impactful in-school programs, and introducing book ownership. Schools that receive Title I funding are eligible to use that funding to bring Malcolm's reading rallies straight to their schools. The organization also has a matching grant program. Experiencing the momentum of this movement within our own state has been incredible. In 2018, the first year I began participating in Read Bowl, North Carolina had 2,000 participants, which is awesome, right? It is. But this year, that number grew to an astounding 11,000 students. How amazing is that? It is my goal to continue to promote and support North Carolina Public Schools' participation not only in Read Bowl, but also in Read with Malcolm's other virtual challenges, all of which are 100% free: Read Camp, Read Marathon, and Read Madness, which we are about to kick off for the first time in just a few weeks. At the school level, every year, I can't wait to share Malcolm's story with my students and engage them in these reading competitions, not because I want to compete against other teachers and students around the world, but because I now know, with all that I am, that no matter what the outcome of the competition, the magic of reading will be firmly rooted inside of their hearts and minds, and that is the greatest win of all. I can't wait to see what this next year holds as I do everything I can to make you proud as a North Carolina teacher, literacy advocate, and the 2023 Share the Magic Foundation Educator of the Year. Thank you.
Would you come join us? We'd love to make a picture. All right, team.
Why am I not surprised? From ninth grade to elementary school. Come stand over here.
Keep squishing in, team. Like we love each other. I'm so glad you came to the front, Shirley.
I know, that's right.
Y'all look great.
Everybody ready?
Where am I looking? Corey.
I'm gonna take like two more and then I'll.
Y'all look great. Thank you. So, it just took them a year to get it. They told me like my first season was excellent yesterday. Yep. Thank you all so much.
How are you gonna top that, Mr. Chair?
Not even gonna try. That was wonderful. All right. So after that terrific celebration, next on our agenda is our state superintendent's report. Superintendent Truitt.
Thank you, Chair Davis, and good morning, colleagues. It's great to be here with you this morning. I can't let it not be said that Nicole and I were at West Johnston together, and it's amazing. You don't normally hear about teachers who move from high school to elementary school, so that was incredible. But she also reminded me of something that I think about every so often, and those CUME folders that she mentioned, where she went back in and looked in the CUME folder, when I was at West, at the end of the year, we all were given the duty of updating those CUME folders. Like, we would all be given 20 folders to go through and make sure
I don't know if they're all digitized now. This would have been, back in 2010. But I remember looking through those cumulative folders as I was organizing the 20 that I was responsible for, and you see those pictures. And every once in a while, you would come across a kid, and you watch them. You're seeing them grow before your eyes, right? Because the first one is in kindergarten, and then it goes up through high school. And it was always jarring to come across that picture, that student, that child who you could tell something had happened based on those pictures. And so what I've never forgotten what she said. And then when I became a coach, and then in other roles, when I found myself observing classrooms where you would go, where you're in a second grade classroom, and then you're in the district in a middle school classroom, and then a high school classroom, you see something happen between the joy of elementary school and then middle and high school, and the same district. You just see such a difference in what's happening in those classrooms. And I think that's something that all of us think about when yesterday when we were talking about the arts, and how those kids were so passionate because that's where they find their relevance. And wouldn't it be amazing if kids could find the same passion and relevance in their core academic subjects? But so often their reading ability is what prevents that passion from coming to fruition. So Mrs. Humphreys is just amazing, and I just feel so lucky that we all got to hear that story this morning. And we will find a way to make sure that her efforts can be scaled across the state. Before I delve into this report, I have a couple of introductions to make. We have 2 new members of the senior leadership team to introduce you to. So first, I am so excited to share with you all that Dr. Jerry Oates, who is the current Regional Superintendent of the Year for the Southeast region, and has been in education for over 25 years as a teacher, assistant principal, assistant superintendent, superintendent of Brunswick County Schools since 2018, is now our Deputy Superintendent of Student Support Services. And Dr. Oates is here with us this morning.
The superintendent, he's from Duplin County too.
Yeah, he is from Duplin County. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Let the record reflect.
Yeah, that's right. I can tell you that he is, I'm sure Dr. Bridges can attest to the fact, he is absolutely one of our most well-respected superintendents across the state. And the team and I could not be more honored that he was willing to come and join us. So he is already making an impact. He just started last week, and we couldn't be happier that he's with us. And then also, we are equally excited to announce that Mr. Ron Dixon from Rowan Salisbury Schools has decided to take on the task of becoming the Assistant Superintendent of District and Regional Transformation. He just started on Monday, and in his role in Rowan Salisbury Schools, he has been the Executive Director of Middle School Turnaround. So he has extensive experience in school turnaround work. And Ron, if you could stand, that would be great. These two will be both Dr. Oates and Mr. Dixon will be working hand in hand to implement the changes in organizational structure and our approach to supporting our districts and especially our low-performing schools. And we're really excited that they have the skills and expertise to make this vision a reality. And we're just really looking forward to digging in and doing this work. So thank you both for being here today. So next slide, please, Dr. Petrie Martin. Thank you. And we'll go one more, please. So I'm really excited to share an initiative that has begun in the East that I was fortunate enough to be invited to and attended. There was an initial gathering of 29 school districts and 14 community colleges at ECU, at their the East Carolina Heart Institute, for an initial planning meeting for a new alliance that will kind of operate at the intersection of education and professional learning, workforce development, economic development, specific to the East. The goal of the event was to focus on how this region can reverse what they say is a decline in homegrown workforce, which is something that the team and I are committed to addressing in our whole state. And so to see this kind of laser focus in the East was really incredible. So again, superintendents, community college presidents, industry leaders talking about how this alliance can bolster workforce in the East. We had a panel that EdNC led, thanks Maria, and on that panel I was joined by Cecilia Holden, who is the president and CEO of My Future NC. And you all know that My Future NC represents our state's workforce and education goals. And then also joined by Jordan Wichard from the Department of Commerce. So we had a great conversation about things like how can our K-12 system and our community colleges better collaborate, and how does industry collaboration align with our priorities? So of course we lifted up Portrait of a Graduate and our career and technical education work that we've been doing for the last couple of years. So moving on, let's see, keep going. Next, I want to lift up something that Karen Fairley alluded to yesterday. So the legislature has funded a new training center that will be the first of its kind in the nation. That's going to be located in a little community, also in the Sandhills, called Bisco. And while that facility is being built, this training center will have a temporary home at Samarkand, which is a training facility located in Moore County for public safety and law enforcement. So Samarkand has a newly renovated academic building, and this is where a lot of the initial work at this training center is going to occur while we wait for the Bisco Center to be completed. So it was quite a turnout at this event. The governor attended, the Attorney General attended, the Department of Public Safety Secretary Buffalo attended, and of course Karen Fairley was there, who introduced Mr. Quentin Trent, who will be in charge of, he is the Center for Safer Schools director, who will be in charge of the training. And so, again, this work will encompass all forms of professional development and training to keep students safe in school, and including bullying, cyberbullying, mental health, all the things that we think of when we think of keeping students safe at school. Let's go one more, yeah. So many of you are familiar with the Holshouser's Legislators Retreat that the Hunt Institute has been putting on for many, many years. Of course, the Hunt Institute, named for Governor Jim Hunt, and the Holshouser's Legislators Retreat was named for Governor Jim Holshouser, who was, I believe, the first Republican governor in North Carolina since 1896 when he was elected. And he and Governor Hunt were friends. And I personally have been attending this, the first time I went to this retreat was back in 2016, I think. And at that time, there were about 3 Republicans there. Well, the Hunt Institute has done such a good job of elevating this event and making it worth everyone's time. And at this retreat last month, I would say there were equal numbers of Democrat and Republican legislators in attendance. It was very gratifying to see, and I was there specifically to talk with legislators about school performance redesign, school performance grade redesign, testing and accountability, and to sort of let them know what our research had been showing and the incredible number of stakeholders that we've engaged in this process, sharing the feedback that we've gotten, the survey results with our over 26,000 respondents, and really having a chance to highlight for them the challenges that we all know we have with our current school performance grade funding, not funding, the formula we use to determine school performance grades. Next was a My Future NC State of Education in North Carolina. This was a special live and public event for My Future NC that the chair and I attended. And the purpose of this organization, as most of you know, is that we have this My Future NC and its goal actually sit in statute. North Carolina is a state that has been able to meet its workforce demand traditionally because we are a net importer of talent from other states. People want to come and live in North Carolina. But Lumina Foundation data that came out in 2016 showed that North Carolina was in danger of not being able to meet its workforce demand, even with that in-migration of folks who want to come and live here. And so while we have been able to rely on that out-of-state talent, it's incredibly important that we make sure that we're preparing those who live in North Carolina for workforce and so that they can pursue successfully the post-secondary plans of their choice. And so this State of Educational Attainment NC was a very well-attended event held here in downtown Raleigh. Sector and business leaders were present. And the data that was shared is that only 28% of students will graduate from high school in North Carolina and earn a degree or a credential within 6 years of graduating from high school. And that number is just too low. The idea that only really less than a third are earning a credential of workforce value or a degree is something that shows us that we need to do something differently. When you factor out those who get a credential of value and we just look at degrees, we're only looking at about 22% of kids earning a 4-year degree by the time that they are 24 years old. Also was highlighted that community college enrollment is down 13% since before the pandemic, and jobs requiring a post-secondary degree or credential are projected to increase by 12% by 2030. And so if you look at the next slide, you'll see that the original goal established in 2018 was 2 million more North Carolinians with a credential of value by 2030. And currently, initially that was a 440,000 person shortfall, and we are still, we are 31,000 individuals behind if we are going to make that goal. So there were 2 legislative proposals shared at this meeting. One of them is career planning for every middle and high school student. We've talked about that at this board table before. We are all in agreement and have asked the legislature to increase the number of career development counselors at our schools, but also to make career planning beginning in the 7th grade through exploration of other careers, making sure that kids understand what the options are. How can they align their interests and passions with something where they can actually earn a living one day, and what do they need to do in order to get there? So that was one thing they raised up, and then something called RAISE scholarships, which stands for Reinforcement and Investment to Strengthen the Economy. And this will extend support that we already have in North Carolina for no-cost pathways to short-term industry value credentials. This would be an effort to get only 49% of North Carolinians have a credential of value, or training and education beyond high school. And so we need to make sure that we are doing everything we can to make sure that the opportunity is there. Next, I had the just wonderful opportunity to spend the afternoon with Dr. Oxendine at SACE, which is the State Advisory Council on Indian American Education. And this is a biannual meeting that happens in collaboration with the department. This is a summit highlighting K-12 education programs and outcomes for Native students. There are 15 members on the council, and at this particular meeting, which was, gosh, there were over 100 people there for sure, Dr. Oxendine, they were honoring the first director of Indian education within the agency back in 1978, Ms. Betty Mangum. And that was incredible to hear her talk about how things were back at that time. And I think on the next page, there's a picture of Dr. Oxendine. And
I have on the same outfit.
It's a little different. And then we had the opportunity, you can see some student performers there that I'm standing with. They were just absolutely incredible. It was just an incredible day of culture, of hope, of reminiscing. I also was presented with a book that will be on display down on the second floor that, back in the late 70s and early 80s when our textbooks did not accurately reflect the Native American experience in North Carolina. Some folks in the Sandhills took it upon themselves to write an accurate reflection of Native American history, and it is a beautiful book. And so that was a pleasure to get a chance to see that and to hear the panel that accompanied it. Next, an update on Portrait of a Graduate. We had our Phase 2 kickoff. Thank you to the board for approving the funds to continue this work facilitated by Battelle for Kids. The purpose of Phase 2, again, is to support our educators and administrators and students in implementing the 7 competencies of the Portrait of a Graduate with rubrics, so that we don't ever want to give teachers one more thing to do. And so by creating these rubrics, we will make it a little bit easier for our teachers to begin to integrate these 7 competencies into any class. These are so easily integrated into our career and technical education and our arts courses, but it takes a little bit more intentionality to do this in our academic courses. So very excited. This work will go on through June, and we look forward to sharing those rubrics when they're finished. And then next, we had a parent advisory council meeting that was very well attended here down in 150. We were able to, again, these parents are coming from all over the state, so they were able to go across the way and meet with their legislators and talk with them about the things that they're concerned about. We talked about, when we were together downstairs, we talked about competency-based education. They had a lot of questions about learning recovery efforts. We talked about school performance grade redesign, and we also talked about the Parents' Bill of Rights. They had a lot of questions about that. There were, the opinions were as different as the number of people in the room. It was definitely a continuum of both comfort and discomfort with the legislation. Lots of questions, lots of advice for the legislature on what they thought could be strengthened or changed or added. And it was a fascinating conversation. And then there's I think the next slide shows a picture of them over at the legislature. So it was a really fascinating day for all of us. And then finally, a couple of months ago at a football game, I happened to meet a retired theater teacher from Durham County Public Schools, and he had been the theater director in Durham at Hillside High School for 30 years, and the theater there is named for him. And we got to talking and exchanged contact information. And a couple of weeks ago, he invited me to come to a performance at Durham, at Hillside High School, of a play that he had written in response to community violence in Durham a few years ago. And due to some recent instances of violence in the Durham community, he had decided to come back to the high school and partner with folks there and students to put the play on again. The play is called State of Urgency, and it is entirely put on by Hillside High School students. And when I learned what the play was about, of course I invited Karen Fairley to attend with me. And the play is told in a series of vignettes about various topics. Things like the talk that Black parents have with their sons about police encounters, violence in the community, lack of parent involvement was one of the topics that the students covered in this play. The idea of being a snitch and how important it is for students to speak up to people in authority when they know that something is going to happen at school or in the community. There were a lot of different topics covered. And then after the play, which was very, very intense, there was a panel discussion with the Mayor Pro Tem of Durham, the Police Chief of Durham, and a woman who is a counselor with a nonprofit in Durham. And the kids sat on the stage, and there were mics available, and anyone from the audience could come up and make statements. And again, very differing opinions about what had been seen at the production, but an incredible conversation about what was needed. One gentleman who had grown up in Durham and had been to jail for selling drugs and now works with entrepreneurs as an entrepreneur himself, pointed out that these kids were not the kids who needed help. That it was kids who were not participating in this kind of thing that we still need to reach. And he gave some suggestions about how to do that. But it was a very respectful conversation afterwards, despite some disagreement in the crowd. Karen Fairley shared her story, growing up where she did with students, and a little bit about her life. And it was just, the students were just incredible. I promised when I got to speak to the students, and I'm coordinating with Mr. Tabb, their director, a day for them to come to Raleigh and have an opportunity to meet with legislators if they want, but certainly to meet with leaders at DPI to share their ideas for what we can be doing to de-escalate violence in schools and the community. And with that, I am happy to take questions.
Thank you, Superintendent. Questions, comments from colleagues?
Thank you.
Seeing none, thank you so much. We'll now take a 10-minute break and return at 10 o'clock. All right, we are back in session, and we'll begin the reports on yesterday's discussions, beginning with the Student Learning and Achievement Committee, led by Ms. Jill Kamnitz. Ms. Kamnitz.
Thank you, Chair Davis. Dr. Olivia Oxendine and I work on this committee, and it is our pleasure to review our discussions from yesterday. We started with 2 items of new business. We had our monthly update on science and healthful living standards. Very busy month for the standards team in science. Close to 4,500 survey responses to the draft 1 of the science standards were analyzed by our own OLR. All grades and courses averaged 75% of participants requesting to keep the objectives, which is a very positive number for this first draft. Consistent use of language, additional clarifications of content, and refinements to the placement of content were some of the trends the writing team worked to address as they developed draft 2. Draft 2 is now out, and a survey on that draft will remain open until March 26th, at which time the data will be analyzed and reviewed by the DRC and reported to the standards writing team, which will edit and revise draft 2. That will come to us, I believe, at our April meeting. The Healthful Living standards writing team has had their first meeting to work on draft 1 of those standards, and surveys will go out in March with a planned presentation to the board in April. So lots of work this month on both of those sets of standards. We also had a presentation on our comprehensive arts education program. March, very timely. March is Arts in Our Schools Month, and a perfect time for the update on this new graduation requirement. We heard from one of our partners at the A+ Schools, which is a program of the North Carolina Arts Council, about the work that they are doing to promote the arts in our schools. And then we had the pleasure of hearing from several students who shared very, very movingly what the arts have meant to them in their lives. Our favorite way to kick off our meeting is hearing from students, and they did not let us down. Woven into that entire presentation was the connection between arts education and the 7 aspects of our portrait of the graduate. So that was a really nice link to the work that's being done around the portrait of a graduate. We then had 2 action items. SLA 1 is an Every Student Succeed Act update. As we discussed last month, this is a request for the board to approve 2 different things. First, the revised federal ESSA plan, including the previously approved addendum for the 21-22 school year. And second, a request for an amendment to continue the use of current year enrollment for end of course participation rather than the cohort-based methodology that had been used prior to COVID. The disruption of high school testing for this cohort of students could have negative impacts on the high school participation rate, which is part of school performance grades. So this is a request from the Department of Education to allow us to use the current year enrollment rather than the cohort model. SLA 2 is a report to the General Assembly 2021-22 North Carolina Career and Technical Education Credential Data. This report includes information collected from the administration of different assessments in which students earned credentials. Statewide, 37% of our graduates who are CTE concentrators earned an industry-recognized credential in the pathway of their concentration, a recovery that brings us close to our pre-COVID numbers. The report is very rich in data, and it shows that we have made great progress with plenty of room for growth. We then had one discussion item, SLA 3, which were high school accreditation recommendations. Schools have the option of requesting accreditation from the State Board of Education. This year, 7 schools in Buncombe County, 3 in Carteret, and 1 each in Paquimins and Yancey are being recommended for our approval. And finally, we have one consent item, which is a report to the General Assembly on cursive and multiplication tables. This is an annual report that lists the compliance of each local school administrative unit with the statutory requirements regarding cursive writing and the memorization of multiplication tables. And that concludes the SLA report.
Thank you, Ms. Kamnitz. So SLA is bringing us 2 action items and 1 consent item. Any questions for the SLA team? Hearing none, we'll move to Education Innovation in Charter Schools, led by Ms. Amy White. Ms. White.
Good morning, Chair Davis, colleagues. I share this responsibility with Joe Kamnitz. We had a great work session yesterday. Let's review first the action items. EICS 1 is the reconsidered 2022 Standard Timeline Charter School application. This is an application by Heritage Collegiate Leadership Academy, Wake County, for a charter in the state of North Carolina. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to have some discussion and questions by board members, and we closed out that discussion with some comments that I read into the record. I wanted to further those comments. There was a question about where those comments came from, so I wanted to re-emphasize that on December the 14th of 2017, a review panel that was set aside after the State Board of Education voted to close the charter school in Bertie County, Heritage Collegiate Leadership Academy, Bertie. A separate review panel met and convened, and the comments that I made yesterday came from the findings of fact, and I just wanted to read again some of those findings of fact and the reasoning behind the committee's recommendation that the State Board of Education not approve this charter application for the state of North Carolina. The separate review panel at the time in 2017 consisted of Ms. Rebecca Taylor, Mr. Eric Davis, and Dr. Olivia Holmes Oxendine. They met on Tuesday, December the 5th, and these are the things that the review panel found. In the charter agreement, the HCLA board agreed to be accountable to the state board for purposes of ensuring compliance with applicable laws and the provisions of its charter. Throughout the time the school had been in existence, the HCLL board and administration have demonstrated significant difficulties in fulfilling the terms of its charter agreement. That was number 4. Number 5 in the findings of fact. In June 25th, 2014, the Office of Charter Schools sent written notification to HCLA that the following sections of the Ready to Open report, this is before the school ever opened, they were found to be insufficient in board governance, funding documentation, school safety, and the board's policy manual. In the following year, in June of 2015, the Office of Charter Schools sent written notification to HCLA Bertie that the school was being placed on governance probationary status for failure to comply with Section 10 of their signed charter agreement. Failure to submit much reports may be grounds for revocation of the charter. Number 7. In October of 2015, DPI sent written notification to HCLA that the school was out of compliance with the statutory requirements in North Carolina General Statute 115C 218.90 that at least 50% of the teachers must hold teacher licenses. On May 5th, 2016, HCLA was placed on cautionary financial non-compliant status for failing to report timely information to the Educational Directory and Demographical Information Exchange System as required by DBI. Furthering, August of 2016, the Office of Charter Schools sent written notification that the school was being placed on governance cautionary non-compliant status for failure to comply with Section 10 of their charter agreement. They failed to provide required documentation related to the 2016 Charter School Performance Framework. Number 10 of the findings of fact. In 2017, DPI sent written notification that the school was being placed on financial cautionary status for failure to comply with the reporting requirements of the Uniform Education Reporting System. In January 2017, this is number 11 in the finding of fact, the DPI sent written notification to HCLA that is being placed on financial dual cautionary status for failure to comply with reporting requirements. Number 12, in 2017 of March, DPI sent written notification that it was being placed on financial noncompliance probationary status for continued failure to submit required timely audited financial statements. Skipping down to number 14, at May 8th of 2017, the meeting of the CSAB, the OCS, that's Office of Charter Schools, provided a report to the CSAB on charter school compliance. During its report, the OCS identified the following compliance concerns. 1, they were continually low performing. 2, they failed to provide timely documentation required for the 2016 Charter School Performance Framework. Letter C, HCLA's 2016 Performance Framework indicated significant academic returns They failed to provide timely audited financial statement submission. They were out of compliance for the statutory requirement to have at least 50% of its teacher's license, and those are the bullet points that I referenced yesterday in my comments for my personal concern about the school's ability to receive another charter for the state of North Carolina. Furthering this document, the review panel made these findings of fact and upheld the state board's recommendation that the school be closed, and it did so. So, Mr. Chair, in summary of all of those comments, it will be the recommendation of the EICS committee that this board not approve the application for Heritage Collegiate Leadership Academy for Wake County. Moving on to EICS 2, we had a request from KIP ENC to request and implement a weighted lottery and amend its mission statement. The amendment to that mission statement further defined the purpose of the school, and the weighted lottery, as we well know, allows additional opportunities for EDS students and families to have choice to an excellent charter school. And so we saw that before us last month as a discussion item. It's back before us for action this month. EICS 3 was the report to the North Carolina General Assembly on our outstanding, amazing, incredible career and college promise, and the evaluation of its cooperative, innovative high school programs. Ms. Sneha Shah Coltrane led that discussion last month. We had wonderful presentations by both students and administrators working in those programs across our state. That report will go to the JELOC after we approve it today. Then we had 3 discussion items. Raleigh Oak Charter School has before us a request to relocate its school in Wake County. They have identified land in southeast Wake County. It is a Waldorf education school, and they are hoping to add additional space for students. It falls outside of the normal 5-mile radius, and so when a school chooses to relocate outside of that 5-mile radius, by state statute, they must come before the state board for approval. It's about 9 miles away from their existing site. That will be before us next month for action. And then the final one, and a very large one, is EICS 6 2023 charter school renewals. I want to begin by thanking again not only our Charter School Advisory Board, but the Office of Charter Schools and their diligent work in preparing the hard copy packet that includes all of the materials that you will have before you over the next month as we consider 38 charter schools and their renewals. Those renewals are broken down into 10-year renewals. We learned yesterday from Ms. Ashley Vaccaro that the recommendations for charter school renewals, all of those schools meet the statutory requirements set out in charter school law as being meeting the requirements for the 10-year renewals. There were several at the 7-year range, and then a significant portion at the 3-year range, as well as 2 schools which are being recommended for non-renewal. There are 2 schools yet to be interviewed by the Charter School Advisory Board. That will happen this month, and the Office of Charter Schools will bring that recommendation back to us in April for discussion and then subsequent action. Mr. Chair, that closes our report on yesterday's committee work. Happy to take questions or comments at this time.
Thank you, Ms. White. So EICS is bringing us 3 items for action today and 3 for consideration next month. Dr. Oxendine.
Thank you, Chair Davis, and thank you, Ms. White. I just have a quick question. I was looking over this marvelous document last night, going through it, studying a bit more all the wonderful data that's included in this compilation. And the school that caught my eye is the Classville Charter School. It's set for 3-year renewal. It's in Wilmington. And I was just paying attention to the academic comparability, and that school is making progress. It's no compliance issues. My question is, so this is a discussion item. Will
would CSAP go back and consider any of these applications for changing the period for renewal? Like this one is no compliance issues, no issues with finance.
Okay. So,
Met.
so the Charter School Advisory Board is charged with reviewing all of that data, which you have in front of you, and then it's the State Board of Education's opportunity to review that data and make its own decision. Sometimes we might agree with, and sometimes we might decide to take alternative action, but that is up for discussion. But the Charter School Advisory Board's recommendations are as they appear before us.
I understand. So I wanted to just draw attention to, caught my eye last night, this particular school.
Other comments from Ms. White?
I would just say that,
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Treasurer?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Treasurer?
Oh, thank you. I mentioned to Board Member White as well as the Charter School Committee yesterday that as these come forward, these dissolutions or divorces, that they include in our packet whether these charter schools are participating in the state health plan or the state pension plan, because we've run into some peculiarities of people trying to exit these plans when the charter schools are no longer in business. So I appreciate Board Member White and charter school folks giving the board that information going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Treasurer. Ms. White?
Just encourage, thank you, Treasurer Falwell. Just encourage board members to review this information, and if you have questions, please direct those to Ms. Vaquero and her staff so that they have adequate time to answer those questions, as opposed to waiting to the April board meeting and bringing questions to the forum where they're faced in a hurry up and answer. So let's do our due diligence ahead of time and have an opportunity to get those questions answered so that we can have great discussion next month. Sound fair? Okay.
Mr. Hall.
Mr. Hall.
Ms. White, so if we have any questions, go directly to them and not through you?
You could send them to me if you wanted to, and I'll be glad to forward it on. That's a great way. They have lots of things on their plate,
Mm-hmm.
so send to me first, and I'll compile and.
Okay. I like that.
Perfect. I was looking for extra things to do.
I know you are.
Yes, I was.
Glad enough.
Yes, with joy.
Any other comments for EICS? Thank you, Ms. White. We'll now turn to the Healthy Responsible Students team led by Mr. Reginald Keenan. Mr. Keenan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Reginald Keenan, along with Alan Duncan. We are responsible for the HRS committee. Yesterday, we discussed action on first reading was the report to the NC General Assembly for 2021-22 consolidated data report. And of course, we know in that report, the subjects of dropout rates, the suspension, expulsion, corporate punishment, reassignment for disciplinary purposes, alternative placements, balancing the public schools. That's the topics that will be discussed in that report. But as we all recall, yesterday was a very thorough discussion about this topic, with many different opinions to what the problem is and how to correct the problem. One of the comments that really catch my attention is the superintendent said, the why. And she's right. The information that we've seen for many years, and I've been here since 2010, and Mr. Ford brought out his points, which is very well taken. The numbers seem to indicate that the disparity stayed the same, and of course, Mr. Blackman, I understand your point when you were saying about color. I think the question is when you have such a high disparity, you do have to sort of aggregate and find out why this is so high and this particular races may not be as high. I say to us that, and Mr. Superintendent, I ask you to consider this. I think one of the concerns that Mr. Ford presented, and I also agree with that, I'd like to find some way to get this topic more before us other than just once a year when we discuss this report. Because if we truly want to answer the question, Mr. Superintendent, was why, we must begin to discuss it at the board more regularly, and we got to be honest, there's going to be some, maybe not a good feeling in the conversation. Maybe somebody may feel uneasy. And uneasy is not a bad thing. Uneasy means you're trying to deal with the problem. And so I'm asking this board to commit to saying, let's put this more out front. Let's talk about it more. It is a serious problem. I like to say the house is on fire. It is on fire. Because our kids, you can't learn if you're not in school. And there's no question that how you decide what should be a disciplinary action, it does depend on a lot of things. And I wish there was a uniform model in place to so that teachers and administrators will know that if this happens, then this is supposed to be the punishment. And one of the recommendations that was mentioned in the report was cultural differences and be able to deal with that. And that is an uneasy topic sometimes for some folks. As Mr. Hall said yesterday, roll your eyes and whatever. Some folks, some administrative teachers may say, well, that's a real bad thing. Another teacher may say, well, that's not really that bad. I understand that, so we got to be willing to dig deeper. And there are some schools out here that are doing good things. Their rates, it's going down as for their disciplinary action. So let's find out what they are doing. Let's find out why they're declining. And so that's what I mean. I'm just asking us to just get deeper and deal what it is, what it is. And I think we'd be surprised in a good way if we just put our head, get together and deal with it. And that was enough on that one. But then the second item, we had, of course, Ms. Karen Furley did a good job on that, and I'd like to commend her for her effort. And she made a promise to continue working on it. We believe that. We appreciate you, because it takes people like you to make a difference in what we're talking about. And secondly, Mr. Chair, we had a discussion item from Ms. Suzanne Small, and that was the amendment to ADVS 09, the whole child in C, and the areas that would amendments was involved was the responsibility of the whole child in C, the membership, the terms, and organization. No major changes, but some amendments had to be called to clean up and make it a lot tighter. And with that, I end with my report, and I thank you for that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Keenan. So HRS is bringing us one action on first reading item for this meeting, and then a follow-up item next month for discussion. Any comments for the HRS team? Lieutenant Governor.
On that one issue about school discipline and other things, the one thing that I want to encourage people to do more than anything is to be honest when it comes to talking about that issue. Because I think there's a lot of, I'm going to say this with all confidence, I think there's a lot of dishonesty going on when we talk about that topic. For whatever reason, people have their own reason to be dishonest when we talk about this disparity between students being suspended or discipline problems. There are going to have to be some deep conversations had with folks that are going to be very unpleasant, and some very unpleasant truths are going to have to be exposed. And in order for us to do that, I think that we have to be mature adults and sit in a room with each other and have those conversations, because there's going to be no easy fix to this. And there's going to be some feelings that are going to get hurt. And there's going to be some people that are going to be very angry about some of the things that some folks say. But if we don't talk about all the problems that exist that are creating this, because all the problems don't just lie with the school. There's some deep-seated problems that lie outside of the school that need to be discussed. If we don't discuss those things open and honestly with each other as mature adults, we're not going to get to the bottom of it. And we've got to get to the bottom of it. So that's just my 2 cents.
Mr. Chair, I think one comment.
Mr. Keenan.
Mr. Chair, I would ask that if you would, for you and Madam Superintendent to talk in the near future as how we can begin to discuss this more as we move forward. If you would.
Yes, we'll certainly do that. Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Keenan, for making that recommendation. I agree with you, and I would say that conversation must include local superintendents who have access to this data, and we need to find out what those best practices are, talk about why, what do local superintendents and principals do when they have this data? Do they do nothing? Do they put practices in place? Do they talk about it? Do they have these hard conversations? And I think that we are all very limited in what we can effect in districts, but we certainly can leverage our respective positions in our communities and on this board to engage with local superintendents and start to answer some of the why
Thank you very
and the
much.
how. Thank you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm firmly confident that the solutions to this issue are already being worked on in our schools by our most thoughtful and dedicated principals and teachers. And our opportunity is to listen and learn from them and then figure out how to replicate and support those efforts. All right, we'll now move to the Government and Community Affairs team led by Mr. Wendell Hall. Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to all. We heard yesterday from Mr. Jamie Falkenberry, Director of our Governmental Affairs Division, about approximately 40 bills that's been filed thus far directly related to K-12 public education in this state. We didn't go over all 40 of them yesterday. Mr. Falkenberry decided, rightfully so, that we would zero in on 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of the bills for some information concerning the impact of what these bills are all about. We didn't go into detail because the bills are not passed. Both houses have not become law as of yet. So understand that as we go forward. We had a good discussion about House Bill 49 dealing with parent rights. These are some bills that we need to be aware of and conscious of as the General Assembly goes through its work. We also talked about House Bill 8, computer science grant requirements that has been filed also. House Bill 17, which deals with the election of the state board members along with the state board, the superintendent of the state being the state board chair. House Bill, I forget the number of it, but the Schools for Deaf and Blind. We talked about the appointment of those individuals. And we had a lot of discussion about the flexibility. And there are a slew of bills, locally bills, dealing with flexibility issues when it comes to school calendar. We don't know where that might go or might not go. Different people feel different ways about the flexibility issue. There was some brief discussion about concern that the ones who are not adhering to the present law, maybe the, not penalty, but the sanction need to be more for those units get outside of the starting and the ending of the school calendar. We also talked about, and it's important for us to remember, that the crossover date for these bills to be in place, to be looked upon, is May 4th. It's on a Thursday, I believe. It's a crossover date, so we let our local representatives know if there are some bills that we feel strongly committed about. We need to let them know that then you have May 4th to do something about this. Had a good discussion about that, and we left these other ones, not that they were not important. We just uplifted these particular 4 or 5 bills and had some discussion about it. Then, of course, the committee went one step forward beyond that, and we talked about teacher pay. And the committee wholeheartedly asked that we, as a state board, consider beginning teacher pay and pay across the state of North Carolina, and the General Assembly looking at appropriate recurring funds to do that. I also would like to read into the record, Mr. Chairman, and ask that it be placed at your discretion, action by this board today. And that statement reads, and I read it yesterday, allow me to read it again, entitled the North Carolina State Board of Education Statement of Support for Increased Teachers' Pay. The North Carolina State Board of Education supports the substantial investment in teacher pay, upwards up to 10% for all teachers, as well as investments in beginning teacher pay to keep North Carolina competitive with the southeastern United States. Mr. Chairman, that is my statement coming from the committee. Hopefully you will place it at the appropriate time for action by this meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Any questions or comments for Mr. Hall and the GCA committee?
Chair Davis, I have a couple of comments. I am absolutely 100% in favor of increased pay for teachers and all educators for that matter. You would be shocked. Well, Mr. Hall wouldn't, because we began our careers about the same era. And what I began, my first check in September of 1970 was shocking compared. It really hasn't improved that much when I think about it over the last number of years. But my point is this: I think any further discussions down the road on increased pay for teachers or educators across the board, seems like since I've been on the board, we have taken a payday to payday approach to increase salary. In my opinion, we need to be looking down the road, the kind of pay increases that address the immediate, every 30 days, paying the bills, stretching the dollar, but also looking forward to what that educator can expect to earn 30 years if they stay in the field that long. It's more of we've got to take a more investment kind of focus and build that into the culture of North Carolina when we began talking about having conversations around salary and pay and benefits. And some of my comment is based on the comments from Treasurer Falwell yesterday. We don't talk, or let's say Olivia, with my own graduate students, I probably don't talk enough to them about the 401k or benefits at the 25th or 30th year. The conversation, we need to shift the conversation from making ends meet to making long-term investments per teacher. Think about the future. Think about your investments. Think about 30 years from now is basically what I'm saying. So if we could begin the conversation in that direction rather than putting Band-Aids on this topic of teacher pay every 2 years during the long session. Thank you.
Other comments? Lieutenant Governor.
I feel the exact same way. I've said it time and time again. It's time that in North Carolina we start paying our teachers like professionals and holding to that professional standard. But it starts with that pay, There are pillars that communities are built on, the states are built on, and those pillars are public safety, healthcare, infrastructure, and education. And you can't have quality education without having quality teachers, and you're not going to have quality teachers if you don't have quality pay. That's the bottom line. It's one of the reasons why I'm such a big proponent of the state being fiscally responsible, because we need to have that money available to pay our teachers. They need to be at the top of the pecking order when it comes time to pass out the money. Because if we don't have those teachers available, we can forget about everything else. We can forget about our economy and our future, because they build our future, so we need to pay them like that. So I feel the exact same way, 100% agree.
Just a final point. The chart that we saw yesterday that was comparing North Carolina with neighboring states, I wasn't all that impressed with that, because if you think about North Carolina, South Carolina was just, we're talking about, well, they paid, I know they pay more in South Carolina. I worked there for a number of years. We need to be thinking of something far more substantial than we saw in that chart yesterday.
And we're seeing huge surpluses in our budget every year, so
yeah,
the money's there.
Thank you.
Other comments? Okay, then, without objection, we'll move this statement to our action agenda for later in this meeting. I would say that, at least in my short term on this board, this is consistent with the board's position on teacher pay year after year after year. We want to be competitive with our southeastern neighbors. I would also add that what I hear from superintendents so often is it's not just the neighboring state, but it's that private employer that's able to offer so much more than we're able to offer. And one of the benefits is we live in a state that has a robust economy that attracts private employers, and we want to continue to do that. But the way to back up the Lieutenant Governor's comments, the way to continue to attract those businesses is to have a sound education system that produces the graduates who can contribute to the employers. So we'll move forward on that. Ms. White?
Can we eliminate the idea of being competitive with other states? Can we, as a board, lead? If we're competitive, that means that we're absolutely satisfied with the status quo. And that is not where we should be thinking. We should be thinking about leading. Because if we're gonna lead, that means that we have an expectation that our students deserve the best, most highly qualified educators that we can put in place. I don't want us to be competitive. I want us to be the place that teachers want to live and raise families and work in an environment where they are respected as professionals. And I'm not picking on diesel mechanics, but I just want to let you know that I have a 19-year-old friend who graduated from high school, and he decided that he did not want to pursue a 4-year degree. He decided that he did not want to go to a 2-year program. He decided that he wanted to be a diesel mechanic, and he went to school for 18 months, and that young man is making more than $80,000 to work on vehicles, because people have to have vehicles to work. Our teachers are raising our future. We need to pay them.
Yes.
Lead.
Superintendent?
Thank you. You know, one of the responses to increased teacher pay I hear a lot is, well, teachers make X percentage more than the average wage in a particular county. And I think that is such a flawed way of looking at teacher pay. That reminds me of the old Oprah story about the producer who said, why should I pay you more? I need to pay him more because he has a spouse and a child. But that makes absolutely no sense, that we would say, well, we're gonna level out teacher pay so that it's doesn't rise X percentage above average pay in that county. We should not be looking at teacher pay based on what other people in a county earn. We need to be looking at teacher pay based on what people with like credentials earn, and how teachers, I believe in market pay for teachers, which is a controversial idea, but we need to be able to attract more teachers across the board, but specifically more teachers in special education and math and science at the secondary level. We pardon me, we must be able to compete with the private sector.
May I add to your comments and retain those that we have through this thing? I'm delighted to hear the conversation this morning, just like the conversation about those our discipline issues. This is where we're going to get there, and to hear everyone, Mr. Chairman, where I've been in agreement with things. And once again, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Hey.
I'm really excited to hear this conversation because as someone, my life has been like greatly affected in a very positive way by teachers, and between conversations with my peers about what we want to be when we grow up, I can think of 2 people I know who say they want to be a teacher, and I think it's really exciting that we're talking about making the teaching profession a much more competitive field, because I think it will attract more people who have the heart for teaching and the passion for teaching, but it's the paycheck that deters them from it. So I'm really excited to hear about all this stuff. Thanks.
Can you beat that comment with Ms. Vice Chair?
In light of the comments that we've heard, Lieutenant Governor's comments, Ms. White's comments, and others, and knowing the sense of the board about how strongly we believe that the teaching profession is critical, and we're at a critical stage in the future of the teaching profession as we look at the data, various aspects. I'm going to make a request to make this friendly amendment to your motion.
Yes, sir.
To consider. So it would say the North Carolina State Board of Education supports the substantial investment in teacher pay, instead of saying upwards so that there's no confusion, in excess of 10% for all teachers, as well as investments in beginning teacher pay to make North Carolina the leader in the southeastern United States. So that changes it from to keep North Carolina competitive with the southeastern states to Ms. White's remarks. Instead, say to make North Carolina the leader in the southeastern United States. So I offer that as a friendly amendment to your motion.
So, Mr. Hall, it's you and Ms. Kamnitz, do you accept this friendly amendment?
I do. We do.
Okay. Okay. Any objections? Then we'll move this to our action agenda and consider it in just a few moments. Anything else for the GCA team? Very good. We'll now move to the Special Committee on North Carolina Pathways to Excellence for Teaching Professionals, and I'll turn to Ms. Jill Kamnitz for this item. Ms. Kamnitz.
Thank you, Chair Davis. We had a visit yesterday from Dr. Van Dempsey, who is the chair of the Professional Educator Preparation and Standards Commission, and has worked, he and his fellow commission members have worked tirelessly on our behalf to bring to us yesterday recommendations regarding the North Carolina Pathways to Excellence for Teaching Professionals. The recommendations for PEPC were 3 in number. One was to forward to the state board their current report on professional pathways and licensure framework, including briefs and supplemental language related to policies, rules, and statutes that the board and the General Assembly would need to adopt, amend, or repeal. That is item number 1. Number 2 is to recommend that the board use this report to initiate piloting a program to study a new professional pathways and licensure system to replace the current system, including 4 areas communicated by the board to PEPC that we wanted for them to consider to be included. And that includes advanced teacher and leader roles, measures of teaching effectiveness, new pathway entry points, and new professional learning tools and structures for beginning and experienced teachers. And then number 3, to communicate to the state board PEPC's commitment to continue to work with us as noted in statutory requirements and as appropriate in the further development of recommendations and operationalization of the pilots. So that particular request, it is recommended, so what we'll be voting on today is it's recommended that the State Board of Education receive those recommendations from PEPC to guide the pilot for the Pathways to Excellence for Teaching Professionals draft model. Then we heard from Ms. Schaefer with a draft of a request to the North Carolina General Assembly authorizing the creation of a pilot and outlining the things that would be necessary in order to do that. So we will also be voting to approve that request to the General Assembly, which is posted on eBoard for those who would wish to see the language there. So our motion is to receive the recommendation from PEPC and to forward the request to the North Carolina General Assembly.
Thank you, Ms. Kamnitz. Any questions on those 2 items? Seeing none, just to echo what's before us today, we get constantly emails about this topic, and we're thankful for every one of them, and we consider every one of them. But I got one last night that I have to highlight. It's from a very thoughtful 3rd grade teacher, an 18-year veteran, and a North Carolina teaching fellow in our state. And she listed 10 recommendations for us to consider. I'm pleased to report that of those 10, 6 are in this plan. Still could be improved, but 6 of those are in the plan. 2, depending on the specifics, could be considered included in the plan. The only 2 that are not is pay for athletic coaches, which is beyond the scope of this, and loan forgiveness, which is worthy of consideration, but again, outside the scope of this. So I'll certainly reply to that thoughtful teacher with this and look forward to continuing to engage with her. But we've got a lot of work to do. I think in terms of our last conversation about how we communicate this proposal and ensure an accurate understanding of what's before us and the potential that this has for the support of our teachers and students. Okay. Thank you for that. Now I'll turn to our educator standards and practice team led by Dr. Olivia Oxendine. Dr.
Thank you,
Oxendine.
Chair Davis. I am Olivia Oxendine, Chair of the ES&P, and joining me in that responsibility is Ms. Amy White. 2 items are coming to the State Board for action today, ES&P. One, both of these are reports, and they are going to very soon go over to the General Assembly in compliance with general statutes related to both of them. The first report is the report on the state of the teaching profession in North Carolina. Was presented yesterday by Dr. Tomberlin. This report really collects data around 2 matrices. One is attrition, the other is mobility. Attrition is leaving the profession. Mobility is moving from one employer to the other. So that is basically the way we collect and define the 2 data points in this annual report. I'm not going to go into all the details. There were some slight changes made. The one change that really stands out a lot is if you recall, the graphic that I think Dr. Tomberlin referred to it as the U-shaped graphic. And after some adjustments in the data, the U shape was not as clearly defined as it was in February. So it became a little bit more dispersed and not as dramatic. And if you recall that particular graphic, it shows that there is a spike about the first 5 years of a teacher's career, and that's to be understood. Levels off about midpoint, around year 12 to about maybe 18, and then it begins to climb again to a crescendo, if you will, to a time of retirement. That is such an important, let me just add this personally, that's such an important graphic for HR directors, principals, and superintendents to consider, because you can look at those years of experience and the spikes and the dips and so on and determine the kind of support that teachers need and when they most need it, like beginning years, what happens in the middle and on to the end. Very good graphic, one that has a lot of application in a practical way in our districts. So that is ES&P, and that is action. The one other point that was made by Dr. Tomberlin yesterday is that those who are staying in the profession, the lowest attrition rate is among our candidates, our teachers with a residency license. And that attrition rate was the lowest, so there's some messages in that as well. The second report that is going over to the General Assembly is the annual report of IHE or EPP performance. And again, we had a 30-day period from last month to this month to hear from our EPPs and others around the need to correct some data. And Dr. Seiberg walked us through the major corrections that were made. Probably the one that stands out the most has to do with the collection window that begins in the fall, the DPI collection window, and ends around April. So that is only capturing about 75% of what an EPP is recruiting for and admitting for the following year. So that was discovered as something that needs correcting. In other words, about 25% of the recruitees and the enrollees are missed in that window. So Dr. Seiberg did note that, now that that's noted, that there is a plan to possibly extend that collection window out from April on to about August, because that's heavy recruitment and enrollee season during the summer months. So that correction was made in 4 of our EPPs: Lisa McCrae, UNC Pembroke, NC North Carolina, A&T, and Appalachian State. Significant positive changes in the data. So the apologies were generous, and the grace extended back to DPI because the response was timely and the corrections made. So that was a win-win for everyone. The last item is an item for discussion. This is ES&P 3, and this is the coming to the State Board of Education. We have 2 community colleges Blue Ridge Community College and Wayne Community College. Both campuses have complied with a framework that we approved in June, and this framework was established by the Department of Community Colleges. Both of these campuses have gone through all the requirements spelled out in the framework, have taken their proposals to the Department of Community Colleges, their Board of Education, and now it's our responsibility to, and we've considered the proposal and the recommendation, and these two community colleges are coming to us to receive initial authorization to operate as an EPP. The programs will be in elementary education, and it will lead to a residency license. That is a discussion item that will return in April for our approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine. So ES&P is bringing us 2 items for action this meeting and 1 follow-up to next meeting. Any questions or comments? We'll now turn to Strategic Planning Committee led by Dr. James Ford. Dr. Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I'm Dr. James E. Ford, Chair of the Strategic Planning Committee, joining this work alongside Ms. Jill Chemnitz. We have 1 item for action. I'm told yesterday we had what is unofficially a record for the shortest report by the committee. I cannot confirm that, but basically we, again, provided very minimal changes, if at all, to the last meeting last month, where we provided the working group feedback around these strategic plans, as well as the following recommendations. And so with no comments from the rest of our board members, that pretty much completes my report.
So this item will be on our action agenda later this morning. Any questions for Dr. Ford? Moving on to the Business Operations Committee led by Vice Chair Duncan.
Good morning, everyone. Along with Reggie, wrong committee. Along with Wendell Hall, we lead the Biz Op Committee. Got my committees confused here as I started. We lead the Biz Op Committee, and we have several items to report on. We started with a new business item, then we have 3 actions on first read, then we have a discussion item, and then we have 2 consent agenda items that are, again, to be voted on today. In new business, we got a report on the federal funding program, specifically the ESSER II dollars, and reports from 2 of our staff members who've been working very diligently on these. Dr. Jenny Korn first reported as Director of Research and Evaluation about some of the research that we authorize and has been done. We get a lot of quantitative research, but in fact, Dr. Korn was reporting on qualitative research in terms of the receiving of several of these programs and trying to take from that best practices. And so that was an interesting report, and one of the first extensive reports we've gotten, or more extensive reports we've gotten on some of the qualitative research work that's being done. We also received a report from Lynn Barber, our Deputy Director of the Office of Learning and Recovery, and she reported on the summer programming, talked about what has been done in the past summer, what has been learned from that, what best practices are being taken from that based on the research that's being done, and then what plans are in place for this coming summer. And we were also able to learn as part of that report that there should be more than adequate funding available for the plans that are in place for this coming summer still to be used for ESSER II funds. So that was a helpful report, and the promise was there will be additional reports forthcoming as we are at this point less than 6 months away from at 6 months away from the end of the ESSER II funding. And then moving to actions on first read, Biz Op 1 is the approval of contracts over $500,000. We had Dr. Mia Murphy, Executive Director of North Carolina Virtual Public School, reported on the eDynamic Learning Career and Elective Courses purchase. These programs are specialized programs, if you will, for our students with various different types, primarily for our students with various different types of disabilities. They're programs that are modified that work well for these students, and so that's an important consideration, and that's a continuation of an existing contract. Our second contract was presented by Dr. Eileen Townsend. This is one of one of the contracts that's very important throughout the state of North Carolina. It covers our workers' compensation claims for all the employees throughout the state. And it is the administrative handling of those claims. This is a contract that's going to be extended for one more year with Sedgwick, if the board votes to do so. And that contract is a very slight increase, a $24,000 increase after negotiation. And Dr. Townsend was able to comment about the very strong support Sedgwick has given to the department for many years. They've had this contract for 7 years now. It will go out to bid in the fall, and so when we next consider this, we will be looking at it after a process has taken place, as opposed to a contract extension. Our third contract was UNC Greensboro Serve. This is part of the American Rescue Plan. It's additional funding that's been made available for the education of homeless children and youth. As we know, we already have significant support from UNCG Serve with respect to our education of our homeless children through the McKinney-Vento Act support. These are supplemental funds, that is in addition to McKinney-Vento funds, and this contract is for the administration of those funds. Melissa Eady from the Office of Federal Programs reported to us about that work. Our last contract is with the Poe Center for Health Education. Ellen Essex reported to us about this. This is the Poe Center oversees work for our Healthy Schools and Specialized Instruction Support for our Healthy Schools Initiative and Healthy Children Initiative. And Poe Center assists the department in that work. Moving now to BizOp 2, which is our second action item. This is a SBE policy amendment, and it's really miscellaneous in nature. It says 6 different things. Ms. White.
Before you go on, could I just make a comment about the contract with the Poe Center?
Yes.
So yesterday I had to step away from the board table and wasn't able to participate in the conversation. And I'm not asking for a separate vote on this, but I did want to just enter into the comments that I would not personally be in support of the contract with the Poe Center due to significant concerns for my personal faith and moral framework for which sexual education is being offered to students in the state of North Carolina. And I have concerns about some of the ways that the Poe Center uses resources to instruct our students. And so I cannot vote in the affirmative for the Poe Center.
Then I think we should pull that item and have a separate vote on that.
May I make a comment, please? So for the same reasons that you just expressed, I specifically asked Dr. Usick if the work that the Poe Center, as it was stated in the materials, would be limited to a sexual risk avoidance education, which is mandated in legislation, and the answer was yes. So I'm not sure if that changes your thoughts, but they are meant to be limited to in the scope of the work to SRAE.
I appreciate that, but my comments remain the same. But I do appreciate the narrow sieve for which they do their work, but overall still have significant concerns about how we're partnering with that agency.
I understand.
To instruct our students.
And if it's helpful, the committee asked those questions as well as we were preparing for the committee meeting. So, but we will hold that as a separate vote.
Thank you.
Pull that item. Yes, Dr.
Yes,
Oxendine.
thank you, Vice Chair Duncan. I am going to not vote in favor of the contract as well. I have a couple of concerns. My one concern is I'm not comfortable with almost like third-party curricula coming from third parties. And this particular curriculum, with Poe being, I consider that a third party. The brief amount of material that I have read that will be in the hands of students or presented to the students, there's some themes that have to do with anti-policing. And I would have to go deeper into that than I plan to, but it's just coming upon a bit of it is enough of a concern for me to not support it. But on a larger, kind of a larger scale, I'm just very uncomfortable. We have an opportunity to do more of exploration of curricula that comes to us, if it should come to us, from our LEAs, from our districts. We have a little bit more control over that. But we don't have any when we have outside entities introducing curricula that we haven't studied, we haven't had presented to us, we haven't had a chance to that, as we do when we consider our new standards. So on that one basis, I can't support the contract.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on this? All right, well, thank you for those. We'll now go on to BizOp 2, which is, as I started to say, it's really a miscellany of different policy amendments. But the first three are actually in the good news category because they represent new grants and they are grants different than ESSER grants. So we haven't had to talk about that for a while. But the first one is the Mental Health Service Professional Demonstration Grant Program, which is a $1.2 million a year grant for 5 years. This is the first year's award of that 5-year grant. And this is it's a partnership to train school-based mental health service providers for employment in school and LEAs, and certainly that's a topic that we have talked about a lot in this board. The second one is School-Based Mental Health Services Grant, which is a new federal competitive grant received by the state intended to increase the number of credentialed mental health service providers in providing school-based mental health services in order to supplement the needs of the LEAs. The first year of this grant, which is again a 5-year grant, is $2,373,740. These grants will, these amendments, policy amendments, will allow for the distribution of these grants. The third grant is a $29,367,000 multi-year grant from the U.S. Department of Education. That's just the first year's award. It's $29 million plus. And this is for Stronger Connections Grant Program. It's a new initiative, and it's for a competitive grant that's intended to support selected sub-recipient public school units with implementing projects to create safe, inclusive, and supportive school environments and to increase place-based interventions and services. So again, this is a topic and area that's of great interest to the board. It's something that we've talked about. All of these items, although these are not ESSER funds, have worsened, as we know, during the pandemic, and this is to provide, these will be very helpful grants in terms of providing important services for our students. Then we have an amendment to the allotment policy for the Federal Sexual Risk Avoidance Education Program, and this is update policy to reflect the requirements of current federal and state law. The next amendment is for career technical education, and this focuses primarily on clarifying the limitations of when you can transfer funds within that PRC, which I know is fascinating stuff to everyone here. And then finally, something we've again talked about a good bit, there's the amendment to the allotment policy for transportation of pupils. Got a report that's positive in terms of through the first 6 months when we're getting ready to distribute some of the reserve. We're well within the budget of the reserve, if you will, and we're optimistic about the diesel prices having gone down recently, that we can, knock on wood, stay in a good position and be well within the reserve for the second 6 months of this allotment. And this gives further definition to how these funds are going to be distributed through the allotment process. So we have those not actually fully connected, but important additional policy amendments. And John promised us, we'll hold to it, that this is the last of the big flurry of policy amendments that we'll see for a while. We have to thank John Kiefer, who does a great job of going through these things for us. So our next item then is BizOp. I should stop. Any questions on that one? Next item is BizOp 3, which is the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 budget update. So reviewed what the budgetary situation is within those two items. And then made an ESSER III funding request. This was again reported on by John Kiefer, who did a fine job. He did a fine job reviewing where the budget is now on ESSER II and ESSER III. And obviously, with a reaffirmation that we'll be careful viewing of that. One is 6 months away, and the other one is 18 months away from needing to be committed, and we have a strong commitment to use those funds well in support of our students and educators. And then with respect to the budget proposal, it was noted that at this point, through various means, there's an excess of $7,377,119 that DPI has identified that can be used for further initiatives. The department has proposed the following activities to be funded with ESSER III state reserve funds, which I should note do not use all of the funds. I didn't do the exact math, but they use approximately $6 million or close to $6 million of the $7.3 million in funds, so there would still be some additional funds that are remaining. And of course, there could be some further that accumulate over the course of the next 6 months for ESSER II and 12 months for ESSER III. The proposed uses are principal coaches, $2.7 million to contract for the provision of one principal coach for every 3 low-performing schools identified in the state reports, as well as to purchase professional development materials to be utilized by those principal coaches in order to support that work. Second one is North Carolina VPS summer school support. It's $1.35 million, and this is to offset the learning loss. It's both for learning loss offset and for acceleration of courses for students who need that work in light of what has happened during the course of the pandemic for our students. Third one is HQIM, which stands for High Quality Instructional Materials Platform. This is a curricular materials platform to assist in the vetting of standards. We talk a lot about standards. This is intended to enhance the work when we're looking at changing standards, which we have to do on a rotating basis, in order to give information that's going to be helpful in terms of curricular materials that would be assigned to the appropriate areas. Then the last item of funding would be for technology and teleworking support for hybrid work environments. With respect to that item, the proposal includes $80,000 to support a Wi-Fi infrastructure support. There's, as you move to more and more hybrid or remote work, your Wi-Fi infrastructure has to be strong. These things need replaced periodically, and so the effort is to make sure that we have an infrastructure that suits the needs of the department. That's an $80,000 item. Then there's an additional proposal requesting $1.5 million to update and improve DPI's meeting spaces, conference centers, and other staff work areas within the facility here in order to support remote work capabilities and facilitate the mitigation of virus transmission within DPI's building. I think those are in light of, I think in part, the anticipation, as we learned yesterday, that the proposal for the new building that the department will be situated in will be considerably less occupiable square footage than where we are now. It will go from 256,000 square feet that's occupiable in the present building to 52,000 square feet. So that's a huge difference, and I know board members have expressed a lot of concern about that since we talked about it yesterday, and perhaps that's something we'll continue to talk with the superintendent about, who I know took a deep breath when she heard those numbers as well. So that's something that we perhaps need to further take a close look at, particularly as we look at a building that hopefully will be built for us to last 50, 60 years. So exactly how that plays out over a 50, 60-year period is something that obviously needs a lot of thoughtfulness, and hopefully has been getting that by the people. There were consultants who came in. I want to be clear about that. So there were consultants who came in to make some of these recommendations. So that's BizOp 3. BizOp 4 was a discussion item, and where we received a report from Jennifer Bennett, Senior Director of the Office of Financial and Business Services, to address issues the board has been talking about for at least 2 years, where we've had real struggles with chief financial officers in our LEAs around the state and attracting and keeping the high-quality people that are needed. I've heard many a superintendent say that you're only as good as your chief financial officer. And so when we have a lot of vacancies, as we've had around the state and in other situations where we really have to work hard to get somebody in place, it's an important position. And superintendents certainly value it very much, and I think we all do. So the program presented by Jennifer Bennett, first of all, focused on redefining resetting out the job description for what a chief financial officer will do in the districts. It's more thorough, it's more direct, it provides the kind of information where it really provides a job description. And as part of that, also took a strong look at what the salary structure would look like. Right now, the salary structure is not one that is attracting candidates who are of the fully qualified area that we would want to have. So, in essence, this raises, if you will, a little bit the qualification standards, but it also raises pretty significantly what the salary structure would look like. And obviously, local districts also have the flexibility to add to the state authorized salary by using local funds. That's not done lightly in a lot of our districts who are pushed for local funds. As Ms. Kamens pointed out during our discussion, in the Northeast in particular, this has been a problem, and local funds are not always plentiful in that area, as is true in many areas around the state. But the idea is to have high level of competence treated with a very high level of professional regard in the structure within the county, and have considerably more compensation available to be able to offer people these jobs. And the NC Accounting Association, I think it's ASBO or NASBO, I won't get it right, but ASBO, thank you, Mr. Hall, is also going to be contributing as part of this in terms of both making availability much more widespread of these positions, make it known to potential candidates, and also work in a mentoring role, as they have been to some degree already, but continue to work in a mentoring role. Good discussion, important topic. Next item, Biz Op 5, is a consent item. That was a report to the North Carolina General Assembly on the advanced courses, AP, IB, and Cambridge AICE, and the teacher bonus program. And there was a very brief discussion on this, but it was very helpful. Ms. Coltrane came to the podium to say, you will note there were a number of districts that had no students, either 12 or 12 more that had less than 10. And she expressed that the department's well aware of that and concerned about it, and that, in fact, there's efforts being made successfully to bring in the community college credits more and the early college type credits more. And they're seeing real progress, particularly in some of those districts where AP and IB is not as easily offered. But that was a helpful report in the sense that it spotlighted some things that were very good to pay attention to. And finally, Biz Op 6 is a report to the General Assembly on the Business Systems Modernization Annual Report. If you've looked at this report, and I know you have, it lists the accomplishments over the course of the past year. Certainly been some struggles with the implementation of this. It preceded the people who are working very hard to make this work now. But there's been a lot of accomplishments that have occurred. It's getting back on track and making much better progress, but we still have work to do. It's the old Robert Frost poem. I think we have miles to go before we sleep on this topic. But in any event, good progress is being made. Updates on contracts were available. There were no questions on the executed contracts report and planned contracts report. And then with respect to our budget, there were no questions about it, but as a party favor, Alexis Schaus gave us the annual report, which I recommend to you. It's got a very nice appearance. It looks this way every year. And it has a lot of really good information in a digestible form. So I commend it to everyone in terms of understanding the finances of the department. And unless there are any questions, Chair Ward, we have a question.
I have a quick question. Going back to that space reduction of the education building, or where it's the space, Is there any justification behind that? Was a study done?
Yes, the study was done, but superintendent.
Well, it was a legislatively mandated study, because ultimately the plan is to tear down the current Department of Administration building and put the UNC system, the community colleges, and the Department of Public Instruction in one physical location. And in order for that to happen, there are several dominoes that have to fall, including moving folks from I don't want to say the wrong buildings, but and Mr. Coltrane might be able to say this better than I can, but we're kind of playing musical chairs with DIT, Department of Administration, Department of Commerce, who we share this building with, and so there will be. The plan has changed a couple of times in terms of how we get to that building on Jones Street, but the bottom line is that building, I think it's going to be 4 to 5 years at the earliest before that building is ready.
And during that time, we will have other guests and friends.
We will have other guests in this building, that's correct. That's correct.
And so already the department will see some loss of space, reduction of space during that time frame.
That's correct. And we already have Wi-Fi problems in this building, as you all have experienced. It's difficult to conduct meetings at times remotely because of Wi-Fi problems in our building. And those will only increase when we have more need for Wi-Fi.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments? Chair Davis, that concludes our report.
Thank you. So BizOp is bringing us three action on first reading and 2 consent items for today. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, I have just a few comments before we move to voting, and that is to echo this board's continued concern for the health of our students, physical, mental, and emotional health. Many of our students were already overtaxed and underserved 3 years ago, and that has only been exacerbated over the last 2 to 3 years. And so to echo the board's support, not only for additional school nurses, but also for social workers who provide the critical services that so many of our students need, our support for more social workers and for increased pay for social workers and for continued increasing access to the health care that our students and their families need across this state is paramount in delivering the education that our Constitution requires us to deliver to each of our students. So we will now vote on any item requiring action from your reports. A thorough discussion and report was provided on each item, including any respective consent items, and a reminder that these consent items are primarily not complex and may have come to the board for discussion the prior month. I note also that board members have seen these items since last week. At this time, I understand that we will have separate votes on these 2 items, the PO contract as part of BizOp 1 and BizOp 3. Is there any request to pull any other items for separate vote for today? Hearing none, I request a motion to approve the following items. Approval of the meeting minutes for February 1st and 2nd, 2023, SLA 1 and 2 and 4, EICS 1 through 3, HRS 1, ESNP 1 and 2, this Strategy 1, BizOp 1, less the PO contract, BizOp 2 and 3, just BizOp 2, and BizOp 5 and 6, the 50 limited license and 3 initial professional license approvals that were requested and closed last evening, the Pathways 1 item, and finally the statement by the North Carolina State Board of Education in support of increased teacher pay. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved, Treasurer Falwell.
Motion by the treasurer, second by Mr. Hall. Any discussion on this motion? Hearing none, Dr. Petrie Martin.
Dr. Oxendine.
Yes.
Mrs. Kamnitz,
Yes.
Mr. Keenan,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Dr. Tipton Rogers,
Yes.
Mrs. White,
Yes.
Mr. Blackburn,
Yes.
Dr. Ford,
Yes.
Treasurer Falwell,
Yes.
Lieutenant Governor Robinson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Duncan,
Yes.
Chair Davis.
Yes. Motion carries. The next motion I request is approval of BizOp 1 consisting of the PO contract. Is there a motion to that effect?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Blackburn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Kamnitz. Any discussion? Dr. Petrie Martin.
Dr. Oxendine,
No.
Mrs. Kamnitz,
Yes.
Mr. Keenan,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Dr. Tipton Rogers,
Yes.
Mrs. White,
No.
Mr. Blackburn,
Yes.
Dr. Ford,
Yes.
Treasurer Falwell,
No.
Lieutenant Governor Robinson,
No.
Vice Chair Duncan,
Yes.
Chair Davis.
Yes. Motion carries 8-4. Our final item for consideration is BizOp 3. Is there a motion to approve BizOp 3? Motion by Mr. Hall. Is there a second?
Second, Treasurer Falwell.
Second by the treasurer. Any discussion? Dr. Tipton Rogers. Excuse me, Dr. Petrie Martin. Excuse me.
Dr. Oxendine,
Got a lot of doctors in my head.
Dr. Oxendine,
Yes.
Mrs. Kamnitz,
Yes.
Mr. Keenan,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Dr. Tipton Rogers,
Yes.
Mrs. White,
Yes.
Mr. Blackburn,
Yes.
Dr. Ford,
Yes.
Treasurer Falwell,
Yes.
Lieutenant Governor Robinson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Duncan,
No.
Chair Davis.
Yes, motion carries 11-1. That concludes our agenda items for this meeting. I want to thank our superintendent and staff for their hard work in preparing this month's agenda and the work on behalf of our public school students. I now call for a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, this is Treasurer Falwell. Can we adjourn in honor of Senator Jim Broyhill, who was laid to rest this week?
Yes, let the record reflect we'll adjourn in honor of Senator Broyhill. Motion by Mr. Keenan, second by Dr. Tipton Rogers. Dr. Petrie Martin.
Dr. Oxendine.
Yes.
Mrs. Kamnitz.
Yes.
Mr. Keenan.
Yes.
Mr. Hall.
Yes.
I thought so.
Okay, Dr. Tipton Rogers.
Yes.
Mrs. White.
Yes.
Mr. Blackburn.
Yes.
Dr. Ford. Treasurer Falwell.
Yes.
Lieutenant Governor Robinson.
Yes.
Vice Chair Duncan.
Yes.
Chair Davis.
Yes, we are adjourned. Have a good day.